King Comics presents Big Baby, Volume 1, Issues 1 to 13, 204 pages of story and art. King Comics also presents Star Crasher one-shot, 32 pages, cosmic sci-fi surrealist adventure. You can find these fine comics at kingcomics.ca, at MaximusRex13 on Instagram, or on Facebook, MaxRex or Big Baby. Hey everybody, what is going on? Hope you're having a great day. I am Maximus Rex. This is Big Baby Reviews. So today we're looking at this classic right here, at least for anyone who was a kid in the early 90s. This is the quote-unquote, pretty sure 100% accurate, best-selling American comic book ever. Somewhere in the 7 to 8 million is kind of, you know, the range that we're talking about, which is insane. Let's not forget that this first issue of X-Men had 5 different covers. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm not sure if it was 4 or 5. I don't remember 100%. I'm gonna say it's 4, and I'll figure it out as I go along, because as I tell you the story of this issue and how I got it before we delve into it, you'll see how the fact that there's multiple covers came into play. So this is the era of the 90s comics where they figured out, you know, that gimmick covers, variant covers, and things like that sell more comics. They still do at this point. And that's coming back anyways today. I see a lot of that, and it amazes me. I'm not really into that stuff, but back then, you know, it was a thing for sure. So what I can remember about this comic, at this point, I've hit my singularity, as we saw last episode, with X-Force number 2, which was dated September 1991. So this comes out in October 1991. I'm still then at that point 10 years old. Let's not forget comics. This is the date. I will mention that they're supposed to take them off the rack, so I would have encountered this in the summer. If I'm not mistaken, X-Men came out in like June? Possibly July? Anyways. So, walking to the corner store with my buddies at the time. I've started reading comics, have encountered X-Force number 2, maybe a few weeks before, and on the rack there are 3 different covers to X-Men number 1. So there was the Magneto cover, there was the Wolverine Cyclops cover, there was the Gambit Psylocke cover, and this cover here. So yeah, 4. This one wasn't there. I apologize. There were only 3. So Magneto, Wolverine, Cyclops, and Gambit and Psylocke. And I was just the slowest of the 3, because as we saw them, one of my buddies grabbed the Magneto cover, one of my buddies grabbed the Wolverine Cyclops cover, and I was stuck with the Gambit Psylocke cover, because at the time I didn't know those characters. I really would have, my favorite cover obviously at that point would have been the Wolverine Cyclops. That's the one I think most people were looking for. Wolverine was a very popular character. He was kind of the guy I was into in the X-Men. So unfortunately I got that cover, but you know, not the end of the world. Lots been said about this comic, you know, so that's the story of how I got it. Now we're gonna delve into it, and again talking about how it affected me as a kid and how I kind of see it today. Jim Lee, I mean, you know, again, just like Rob Liefeld, I think this is probably peak Jim Lee for me. Just after Uncanny X-Men, I find he gets just like a next level kind of expansion in his art with X-Men number 1. And just like Rob Liefeld, you know, X-Men number 1 to X-Men number 5, 6, 7 is kind of the sweet spot for me for Jim Lee. I do still kind of like the art in Wildcats, but already it's a little bit different. It's not exactly what I get in this series here. I think to me this is peak Jim Lee, even compared to stuff he's doing today, just like Rob Liefeld. So this cover, we got Beast, Professor Xavier in his new fancy Jim Lee wheelchair, Jean Grey, Storm, and Archangel at this point, because he's been changed from Angel to Archangel. And as most of you know, but I'll point it out, this cover is part of 4 variant covers that when you put next to each other form one big image. And you can actually, they published a special edition eventually, which has that gatefold cover all in one. A little more expensive. Probably has a smaller print run. It's probably worth more in a weird way. So let's crack this guy open. All right, so this, for me, other than video games and cartoons, my cartoon adventure with that X-Men pilot episode I talked about a few reviews back, this is kind of my first real exposure to X-Men, other than Wolverine. Again, I love the art. We're getting, you know, a lot of storytelling here, setting us up real quickly. Some cool text, some ships. Nothing wrong with all this art. Typical cool Jim Lee stuff. And then bam, we get the double spread, right? Which is super awesome. As I said last episode with the X-Force issue 2 double page spread, I appreciate when artists throw in extra panels and things and, you know, kind of make a double page spread a little more storytelling worthy, I guess is how I'd put it. I certainly can't say anything bad about this one. You get the cool kind of action pose from Magneto. I copied the shit out of this pose and used it so much. Right, the way to draw that open hand like that, like I still kind of do it that way, or do things that I learned in this hand here. And again, you know, I'll talk a lot about, you know, to make dynamic images, it's important to vary your layers and create, you know, foreground, midground, background, and multiply that even more. This is like a perfect image for that to kind of explain it, right? Because you've got the big astronaut here closest to us, somewhere in the foreground. So we're kind of like maybe just one, you know, foreground ahead of him. You know, and then next to that we've got Magneto, who's obviously, you know, the next in line. Behind him, these floating astronauts, you know, getting further and further away. Asteroid M, I believe it's called, if I'm not mistaken, right? Which helps to, you know, the fact that you've got this character here helps to give you the scale of what's behind there, that's further away. And then of course we have some debris and stuff overlapping the Earth, which obviously we understand is even further back. And then, of course, the starry background, which is the ultimate background in this image and illustration here. Okay, so what makes this image evocative is partly the pose and the energy and that, but it's the composition, right? And the layering from foreground to middle ground to background. Very cool here, shading, hatching, I don't know what you'd call that, you know. It doesn't make sense, kind of, and not really, but it looks really cool. That's what I'll say. This is like a classic Jim Lee shot. I copied this face a lot. And then doesn't spend too much time on background and stuff, but you know, enough here that we get what's going on. So we get a bit of backstory, you know, they aren't happy with Magneto. Obviously we got Nick Fury here. Always liked like these kind of more storytelling shots that Jim Lee will do, like the way he hatches and shades. Looks good, kind of cinematic. There's something to it. He's got a bit of sweat on his brow, like nice little details there. He's clearly stressed, right? I still think, you know, while Jim Lee's not the master of facial expressions and body language, he does have his moments where he just kind of does it well and nails it. Here's another good one, I think, of, you know, feeling that character's frustration. It's a good pose for frustration. Okay, another double page spread. This is early 90s, right? Pre-image, so, you know, you're going to get a lot of those. But what can I say? Great shot. Again, copied this, copied that, copied that, copied that. Copied all of these poses in my drawings as a 10-year-old, 11-year-old. And again, I appreciate, just like Rob Liefeld last episode in X-Force 2, not much here, but adding a bit of storytelling, an establishing shot. We get the manor that they live in, the X-Mansion. Just a quick faraway shot. Very effective, you know, not wasting too much time. This is what we want to see, let's be honest, right? Love the tech and stuff, the beast here. Good stuff. Yeah. I mean, this issue 1 is basically just setting up that Magneto's the bad guy, and hey, here's the X-Men, which is what issue 1 should do, right? So as a kid, totally loved it. Not the greatest story ever in the history of comics, but, you know, decent enough. Good shots here. Jim Lee, we know, can draw the ladies very well. And he's showing it off here. Both, just the body language here works, you know, her face. There's, I don't want to say realistic. It's still comic books, it's still pen and ink, but, you know, a little more illustrative, I guess I'd say. Illustrative, tomatoes, tomatoes. All right, so more training. This seems to be a trope, right? X-Force 2, training. X-Men 1, training. Maybe the you know, somehow subconsciously I'm going to school, so that drives home the point and works with kids for some reason. Always thought this, you know, face here was Jim Lee kind of doing a Silvestri, or trying, you know, getting some ticks from Silvestri for when he draws ladies, you know. I think these guys were definitely cross-pollinating and learning from each other. Some cool shots, you know. Again, this is like awesome shot. Good shading and stuff, and looks dynamic, fun. Drew this pose, copied swipe this pose lots of times. This one too, a flying character. You know, anytime I draw a flying character, that's ingrained in my head somewhere. You know, I bring it back every once in a while. Got a cool team shot here with Gambit, Psylocke. I mean, Killer Wolverine, right? Jim Lee is, you know, my apologies. Jim Lee is definitely, you know, one of the premier Wolverine artists. Even sometimes, like, I like stuff like this, a little drawing like that. This whole thing here, this whole panel with the foreground elements of the robots, just their legs kind of moving in. There's more in the background. You have some silhouetted ones behind them, and at that size, like, it just reads so well and is so cool. I would just say maybe the colors are a little dark and could have been lighter, at least for the X-Men characters here, to split them from the background. But in spite of that, it's still pretty clear what's going on, and like cool little drawings and cool poses. Just very well done at that size. It's not easy to do. You know, this is maybe a little bit more time consuming and easier to do, right? That's what I would say. Takes more time, but easier to do than something this small. Maybe takes less time, but to make it dynamic and stuff, not easy. All right, more awesome, super cool issue 1, get you excited shots. Copy that, copy that. Gambit kisses Jean Grey, turns out she's a robot. Something weird about that. I'll just comment on this, because as much as I love Erik Larsen, I remember for some reason just not liking the way the X-Men looked here compared to the rest of this issue. And I was like, oh my God. I do appreciate it now, honestly. I love Erik Larsen. There's just something about here. Like, I love these expressive faces down here. These are all pretty cool. This one's a little odd. It seems like it was inked maybe by someone else. But this drawing here and back then, something annoyed me about it. I just didn't like it. But I eventually learned to really, really appreciate Erik Larsen. Really love his stuff. And I also assume that this was probably done pretty small. You know, that's why the characters just don't have as much detail, I guess. And this is a cool sequence because, of course, Wolverine is the ultimate badass, and he's even going to make it out of the simulation to find, you know, in this case, their exercise was to find Professor X. Literally finds him, and of course, you know, kind of somewhat menacingly threatens him, schnicked with the claws and stuff. And this is Claremont, you know, still writing, so he's still using those tropes of Wolverine. Like, eventually Wolverine does become, I would say, overall less menacing to the rest of the team and more of a team player. A little bit. He's still Wolverine, but Claremont here is still at the point where he can play that, you know, Wolverine hasn't, you know, Weapon X has happened, but we don't know exactly what's 100% true in his background, his memories and all that. So he can still play that mysterious kind of, is he a good guy or a bad guy kind of trope, right? Which Wolverine kind of started out with. Which later on, once Wolverine clearly is more of a hero in the continuity, they kind of move that trope onto Sabretooth, and he joins the X-Men, right? Later on. So, you know, Wolverine, chill out, Cyclops, all the usual X-Men tropes that Claremont brings into his stories, which is cool because, you know, later on what would happen is you'd have less and less story in the X-Men series without Chris Claremont. Still kind of wordy, maybe a lot to read, but I do think with the art and the flow of the balloons, kind of, you know, each balloon not being too much text, it does read fairly well. And again, being the introductory issue, they're really establishing a lot of things in this issue. They got to make sure every kid who picks up this comic, if it's their first comic, that they understand the relationships. So they have to establish all these things, right? The relationship with Magneto and the relationship with the characters amongst themselves, right? What's going on here? So we get this, you know, I don't like when they do this because it kind of cuts into the flow of the comic. But so they included this pinup here, a villain gallery by Jim Lee. If I'm not mistaken, each issue had a different one. So I don't know if you can see that properly there. I'm trying to do my best. So it's a villains gallery is what it said here. So all the X-Men villains, it does feel, compared to most of Jim Lee's stuff, this was probably done really quick. His Sabretooth, I wouldn't say is a classic kind of Jim Lee Sabretooth, but, you know, great drawing, not complaining. Nice to have a little bit of extra stuff in this first issue. When you're a kid and you read it, I'm sure when I saw this, well, whatever pinup I had in my version with Gambit and Psylocke, I was pretty happy about it. If I'm not mistaken, I think it was like a side of the pool shot. The X-Men are just all at the pool. Is that possible? I know that pinup exists. Not sure which issue it was in, but which variant cover issue. So here we have these guys who basically want to join Magneto. I think they're called the Acolytes, right? And they're on some of the astronauts or the other people they were fighting out in space have also been brought onto the ship. So Magneto comes out and what is going on? And, you know, one of these guys guns down the girl here. Magneto's not happy, so he takes care of him. Basically gives him the same medicine. Kind of happens off camera, which is clever. You know, Marvel, you have to be careful with splatter and stuff. So basically shoots his head. I assume he's shooting his head off panel, right? And basically the Acolytes are here to tell Magneto that they need him and, you know, they want to join him. And some alarms set off, so we get some more cool action shots. Beast and Wolverine obviously are the first to be ready and on the way to where they're needed for, you know, some sort of dramatic situation, action, some dangerous thing happening. In this case, it being Magneto and him apparently having taken a nuclear sub with nuclear weapons out of the ocean that had been sunk at some point, I think by him. And if I'm not mistaken, he's bringing that up to asteroid M. Not 100% sure on that. The backgrounds aren't clear here. They might still be on Earth. I'm assuming they are because the jet is here, the Blackbird, yeah. So, okay, they're at the site where Magneto has pulled up this nuclear sub. So, again, more cool action going on. All trying to attack Magneto. Psylocke giving us a crotch shot. Some cool Wolverine action. Always like the shot here. Still copied this to death. Me and every other artist from at least who got inspired by this comic. We got Magneto here. This is kind of a cool shot where he, you know, falls through and is surrounded by the skulls. I think these are his victims from some previous story, which I'm not too familiar with. So everyone's going after Magneto. He's got the nukes. He's pulled them out. Rogue gets attacked by the military. A nuke is released here. And of course, Magneto, beaten and battered. Back on Asteroid M. Acolytes here, taking care of him. Lots of reading. A little bit too much here. It gets to be much. That's where you see this is still Chris Claremont writing the X-Men. So now the Acolytes creating some destruction here. If I'm not mistaken, they're in Genosha, where mutants are treated as slaves, or up until recently were treated as slaves. Correct me on that in the storyline. But again, though, as a kid, I'm just appreciating the drawing, right? Just like the last issue, last episode, X-Force number 2 by Rob Liefeld. There, even though Jim Lee's maybe more technically skilled, we could argue, there's still stuff in here that is attainable, right? How to draw the muscles and stuff. I learned a lot originally from looking at these comics and Rob Liefeld. And, you know, the fact that Jim Lee's a little more sound anatomically, but would, you know, some people say realistic. I just say his anatomy is a little more sound, and maybe the anatomy is more realistic generally. But they're using a lot of same hatch lines and stuff, similar, just in a different way. Similar lines in a different way. And I, you know, kind of took some of that from Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld, right? There's good stuff to take from both. So again, won't bog you down too much. As a kid, you know, I read this once, and after that, just kind of look through it and look at the drawings. Swipe this, you know. They don't say it here, but what we're getting here is a fastball special. You think you would mention it. It's kind of a thing every time it happens. And a fastball special, for anyone who doesn't know, is when, you know, a fairly big character, usually Colossus, but anyone who's fairly strong on the X-Men, grabs Wolverine and throws him at a bad guy. It's a trope, once again. You know, it's a fun one. Sometimes it doesn't appear for years, and then it does, so it's kind of cool. Yeah, it's always kind of fun when you see it. And another one of these double page splashes with some extra little bit of panels thrown in for storytelling effect, which I think is great. We're actually getting, you know, the end of this issue, which continues into issue 2 and what Magneto's all about, right here with the X-Men. And we get a bit of a B plot line here with some other characters, Banshee, and I forget her name, Maura McTaggart, who's from previous storylines I know nothing about. So I remember as I was reading this, and there was B story in you know, X-Men 2, 3, 4, and as we moved ahead, I had no idea what was going on with her and what her deal was, because I had no prior knowledge of her. So that's where this issue ends, on a great double page splash. This drawing here, I know I copied to death. Okay, specifically, this is probably the one in this issue that I just drew over and over and over. Yeah. So again, I'm well on my way. I have, decided to, hopefully one day be able to become a comic book artist, professional, cartoonist. And this is another issue. The Singularity has happened. This is Singularity Part 2. And, eventually, once all these guys form Image Comics, that's going to just fuel the fire even more. At least art-wise. Storytelling, not so much. So there you go. Next issue, Firestorm. We're not going to review that specifically, but that's what's coming up. And I will comment on these horrible X-Men action figures. If you're reading the X-Men comic at this time and you see these action figures, nothing here entices you to want to buy them. Okay, the design, it's the Cyclops is not the Cyclops in this. The design in this new Jim Lee design in this issue. You have some more modern designs, but that's not Storm's design right now. That's a really bad design. And the toys overall, if you look, the detailing and stuff, they are horrible. Thankfully, look at Wolverine's face here. That's doesn't even make sense. So thankfully what's going to happen is in a few years, once Todd McFarlane gets going, starts his Spawn comic, and eventually his toy company, once he puts out that first series of Spawns, which even, looking today is not that great, but at the time was so much better looking and more detailed and had more articulation than most toy lines at that time. So he's going to really up the game in the toys, where you get super awesome toys like we have today, where they're basically movable sculptures is what I'd say, especially the McFarlane toys. So there you have it, X-Men #1, October 1991. This is, the height of the Singularity for me, and this comic goes a long way to making me a lifelong comic book fan and, of course, illustrator and artist. Thank you so much for indulging me in watching this video. Hit like and subscribe if you can. And I wish everyone out there a great day. Thank you so much for watching.